John Miller was a man who had learned to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. At 35, he was a single father to his 6-year-old daughter, Emma. Life had not been kind to John. His wife, Claire, had passed away 3 years ago after a brief but fierce battle with cancer. Her death had left a void in their lives that nothing could fill. John had promised Claire on her deathbed that he would raise Emma with love, patience, and unwavering dedication. And he had kept that promise, even when the days felt impossibly long and the nights even longer. John worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. During the day, he was a mechanic at a small auto repair shop in their hometown of Maplewood. The shop was run by an old friend, Mike, who had given John the job out of pity, but had quickly come to respect his work ethic. In the evenings, John delivered pizzas for a local restaurant. The tips were meager, but every dollar counted. Between his 2 jobs, John barely had time to sleep, let alone spend quality time with Emma. But he made sure to tuck her into bed every night, no matter how late he got home. Those few moments with her were the highlight of his day. Emma was a bright and cheerful child, a spitting image of her mother. She had Claire's curly brown hair and her infectious laugh. But John could see the sadness in her eyes sometimes, especially when she talked about her mom. He did his best to fill the void, but he knew he could never replace Claire. Still, Emma was his reason for pushing through the hardest days. She was his anchor, his motivation, and his greatest joy. Financially, things were tight. John's paycheck from the auto shop barely covered their rent and utilities. The pizza delivery job helped with groceries and Emma's school expenses, but there was never enough left over for extras. John had dreams of starting his own auto repair business someday, but that seemed like an impossible fantasy. He didn't have the savings or the credit to get a loan, and he couldn't afford to take time off work to pursue his dream. For now, he was stuck in a cycle of exhaustion and survival. Despite his struggles, John was known in the community as a kind and generous man. He was the kind of person who would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. He often helped his neighbors with small repairs or ran errands for the elderly couple down the street. It wasn't much, but it was his way of giving back, even when he had so little to give. John believed in the power of kindness, even if the world hadn't always been kind to him. One rainy evening in late October, John was driving home after a long shift at the auto shop. He was tired, his back ached from bending over car engines all day, and all he wanted was to get home, eat a quick dinner, and spend a little time with Emma before she went to bed. The rain was coming down in sheets, making the roads slick and visibility poor. John gripped the steering wheel tightly, focusing on the road ahead. As he turned onto the quiet stretch of highway that led to his neighborhood, he noticed a car pulled over on the side of the road. The hazard lights were blinking, and a woman was standing outside, looking at a flat tire. She was dressed in a business suit, her hair soaked from the rain, and she looked utterly helpless. John hesitated for a moment. He was exhausted, and the thought of getting out in the rain to change a tire was the last thing he wanted to do. But something inside him wouldn't let him drive past. He pulled over a few feet ahead of the stranded car and got out. "Need some help?" he called out, raising his voice to be heard over the rain. The woman turned to him, relief flooding her face. "Oh, thank God. I've no idea what to do. I've never changed a tire before." John nodded and walked over to her car. "Don't worry, I've got this. I'm John, by the way." "Sarah," she replied, shaking his hand. "I can't thank you enough for stopping. I've been here for almost half an hour, and no one else has even slowed down." John gave her a small smile. "It's no problem. Let's get you back on the road." He grabbed his tools from his trunk and got to work. The rain made the task more difficult, but John was used to working in less than ideal conditions. As he worked, Sarah stood nearby, holding an umbrella over him in a futile attempt to keep him dry. They made small talk, and John learned that Sarah was a business consultant who had been in town for a meeting. She was on her way back to the city when her tire blew. "You're really good at this," Sarah remarked as John tightened the last lug nut. "Comes with the job," John replied, standing up and wiping his hands on his jeans. "I'm a mechanic." Sarah smiled. "Well, I'm lucky you came along. I don't know what I would have done otherwise." John shrugged modestly. "Just glad I could help. Do you need me to follow you to make sure you get home okay?" Sarah shook her head. "No, that's okay. I'm not far from the city now, but thank you. Really, thank you so much." She reached into her purse and pulled out a wad of cash, offering it to John. He shook his head and held up his hands. "I can't take that. I was happy to help." Sarah looked surprised. "Are you sure? You've saved me a lot of trouble." "I'm sure," John said firmly. "Just pay it forward someday." Sarah nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I will. Thank you, John." John waved as she got back into her car and drove off. He was soaked to the bone and even more exhausted than before, but he felt a sense of satisfaction. Helping others was one of the few things that made him feel like he was making a difference in the world. The rain continued to pour as John watched Sarah's taillights disappear into the distance. He stood there for a moment, the cold water dripping from his hair and clothes, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and contentment. Helping others always gave him a sense of purpose, even on the hardest days. He shook off the rain as best as he could, climbed back into his car, and continued his drive home. The roads were quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes during a heavy rainstorm. The rhythmic sound of the windshield wipers and the hum of the engine were the only noises accompanying him. His mind wandered as he drove, thinking about Emma. She would probably be asleep by the time he got home, but he still wanted to check on her to make sure she was warm and safe. He thought about the bills piling up on the kitchen counter and the upcoming parent-teacher conference at Emma's school. Life felt like a never-ending cycle of work and worry, but John tried to stay positive. He had to, for Emma's sake. When he finally pulled into the driveway of their small, modest home, he noticed the living room light was still on. That was unusual. Emma usually went to bed by 8:30 and it was already past 9 ta. He hurried inside, shaking off the rain, and found Emma sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching cartoons. "Hey, sweetheart," John said, his voice soft but filled with concern. "Why are you still up? You should be in bed." Emma looked up at him with her big brown eyes, a hint of guilt on her face. "I couldn't sleep, Daddy. I wanted to wait for you." John's heart melted. He sat down beside her and pulled her into a hug. "I'm sorry I'm so late, kiddo. Work ran long, and then I had to help someone on the way home." Emma tilted her head, curious. "Who did you help?" "A lady with a flat tire," John explained. "She was stuck in the rain, so I stopped to fix it for her." Emma smiled. "That was nice of you, Daddy." John ruffled her hair. "Well, you know what Grandma always says, if you can help someone, you should. Now let's get you to bed, okay?" Emma nodded and let John carry her to her room. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and turned off the light. As he stood in the doorway, watching her drift off to sleep, he felt a surge of love and determination. No matter how hard life got, he would always do everything he could to give Emma the life she deserved. The next morning, John woke up early, as usual. He made breakfast for Emma, pancakes, her favorite, and packed her lunch for school. As they ate together, Emma chatted excitedly about a project she was working on in class. John listened intently, savoring these moments of normalcy. After breakfast, he walked her to the bus stop and waved as the bus pulled away. Then he headed to the auto shop for another long day of work. The shop was busy, as it always was on weekdays. John spent the morning under the hood of a sedan, replacing a faulty alternator. His hands moved with practiced ease, his mind focused on the task at hand. Around noon, Mike, the shop owner, came over to check on his progress. "How's it coming, John?" Mike asked, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. "Almost done," John replied, tightening a bolt. "Should be ready for the customer by 1. Mike nodded approvingly. "Good work, as always. You're a lifesaver, you know that?" John chuckled. "Just doing my job, Mike." Mike hesitated for a moment, then said, "You know, John, you got a real talent for this. You could run your own shop someday." John sighed, setting down his wrench. "I've thought about it, Mike, but you know how it is. No money, no time, no credit. It's just not in the cards right now." Mike clapped him on the shoulder. "Well, if you ever change your mind, let me know. I'd be happy to help however I can." John smiled gratefully. "Thanks, Mike, that means a lot." The rest of the day passed in a blur of oil changes, brake repairs, and tire rotations. By the time John clocked out, he was exhausted but satisfied. He picked up Emma from her after-school program, helped her with her homework, and then headed out for his evening pizza delivery shift. As he drove through the familiar streets of Maplewood, delivering pizzas to hungry customers, his mind kept drifting back to the woman he had helped the night before. Sarah. There was something about her that stuck with him. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him, with genuine gratitude and a hint of something else, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. Or maybe it was the way she had insisted on paying him, even though he had refused. Most people would have just taken the help and moved on, but Sarah had seemed different. John shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He didn't have time to dwell on chance encounters. He had bills to pay and a daughter to raise. Still, as he made his last delivery of the night and headed home, he couldn't help but wonder what had become of Sarah. Had she made it back to the city safely? Was she thinking about their brief meeting as much as he was? When he got home, Emma was already asleep. He checked on her, as he always did, and then collapsed onto the couch, too tired to do anything else. He turned on the TV, flipping through channels aimlessly, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about Mike's words earlier that day. Could he really run his own shop someday? It seemed like an impossible dream, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't completely out of reach. The next few days passed in a blur of work and routine. John helped Emma with a school project, fixed a leaky faucet in their bathroom, and even managed to squeeze in a few hours of overtime at the auto shop. Life was busy, as always, but John tried to stay focused on the positives. He had his health, his daughter, and a job that paid the bills. That was more than some people had. Then, one evening, as John was sorting through the mail, he came across an envelope that made him pause. It was addressed to him in elegant handwriting, and the return address was from a law firm in the city. John frowned, his heart racing. What could a law firm want with him? He tore open the envelope and pulled out a letter. As he read, his eyes widened in disbelief. The letter was from Sarah. She had tracked him down through the auto shop and wanted to thank him again for his kindness. But that wasn't all. She had included a check for $50,000. John stared at the number, his hands trembling. It couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake, but as he read the letter again, he realized it wasn't. Sarah was a millionaire, and she wanted to repay him for his act of kindness. John sat down, his mind reeling. He didn't know what to do. Should he accept the money? It felt wrong somehow to take such a large sum for something he had done without expecting anything in return. But at the same time, the money could change his life. It could give him the chance to start his own business, to provide a better future for Emma. He felt torn, unsure of what to do. That night, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, John thought about Sarah's words in the letter. She had written, "Kindness like yours is rare, and it deserves to be rewarded. Please accept this gift, not as payment, but as an investment in your future." Her words echoed in his mind, and slowly he began to see the money not as a handout, but as an opportunity to build a better life for himself and Emma. The next morning, John made his decision. He would accept the money, but he would use it wisely. He would start his own auto repair shop, just like he had always dreamed, and he would make sure that Sarah's generosity was never forgotten.